Isabella's hands won't stop shaking. She's staring at a passport that shouldn't exist. Her sister's face. Her sister's name. But Maria left Dubai 9 months ago. Didn't she? The entry stamps say otherwise. UAE, Dubai, last week, last month, 3 months ago. Her sister never left. Her husband's safe. Her sister's passport. 9 months of lies. Isabella's heart is pounding so hard she can barely breathe. Every text message Maria sent from Abu Dhabi flashes through her mind. Every phone call that went unanswered. Every excuse Rashid gave about being too busy to check on her. She reaches deeper into the safe, pulls out more documents. An apartment lease, medical bills, a property deed to a villa she's never heard of. And then she sees it. Hospital paperwork, maternity ward, patient name, Maria Santos. Procedure, twin delivery. Date, 3 months ago. Isabella's world stops. Her sister didn't just stay in Dubai, her sister had babies, and her husband knew. Welcome to True Crime Story Files. Real people, real crimes, real consequences, because every story matters. Subscribe now, turn on the bell, and step inside the world where truth meets tragedy. 18 months earlier, Isabella Santos sat in a fertility clinic in downtown Dubai, holding her husband's hand while a doctor delivered news that would change everything. The doctor had been kind but direct. After months of tests and procedures, the numbers were undeniable. Isabella's chances of conceiving naturally were below 5%. Not impossible, the doctor had said, but highly unlikely. Rashid Al-Mansouri squeezed his wife's shoulder and promised they would find another way. He had always been a problem solver. The kind of man who believed every challenge had a solution if you looked hard enough. But that evening, sitting alone on their apartment balcony overlooking the glittering Dubai skyline, Isabella felt the weight of that 5% crushing her. The city stretched out below, millions of lights representing millions of lives. And she had never felt more isolated. Her phone rang, breaking through the silence. It was her younger sister calling from Manila. Maria's voice burst through the speaker with an excitement Isabella hadn't felt in months. She had been accepted into a prestigious hotel management program back home. It was everything Maria had worked toward, and Isabella genuinely celebrated with her. But as they talked, an idea formed. What if Maria didn't start that program in Manila? What if she came to Dubai instead? The thought seemed to solve 2 problems at once. Maria could pursue hospitality training at one of Dubai's luxury hotels, and Isabella wouldn't feel so alone anymore. She pitched the idea carefully, not wanting to sound desperate, but Maria's response was immediate enthusiasm. Within weeks, Rashid had arranged everything: a visa sponsorship, a job placement at a 5-star hotel, work permits, and residency documents. When Isabella picked Maria up from Dubai International Airport 6 weeks later, her sister emerged from arrivals looking overwhelmed and wonderstruck. At 24, Maria still had that brightness in her eyes that Isabella remembered having before the fertility struggles began. They embraced in the middle of the terminal, and for the first time in months, Isabella felt something close to hope. Rashid joined them with his characteristic warmth, welcoming Maria to Dubai and insisting she call him by his first name, rather than any formal title. He was good at making people feel comfortable, at reading what they needed and providing it. It was one of the qualities that had drawn Isabella to him in the first place. As they drove back to the apartment, Isabella linked arms with her sister and told her she was going to love it here. And for a while, it seemed like she was right. Maria moved into their spare bedroom, and the apartment that had felt so empty suddenly came alive again. Rashid used his business connections to secure Maria a position at the hotel's guest relations department. The pay was decent for a newcomer, and the experience would be invaluable. Within days, they had fallen into a comfortable routine. Family dinners, shared stories about their day, laughter that had been absent for too long. Isabella found herself smiling more. She would come home from her job at the financial consulting firm to find Maria experimenting with recipes in the kitchen, or Rashid helping her practice her English for hotel interactions. It felt like a family, something Isabella had been craving without fully realizing it. But there were moments, small and easy to dismiss, when something felt slightly off. One evening, Isabella fell asleep on the living room couch. Exhausted from a particularly demanding project at work, she had spread her documents across the coffee table, determined to review them before morning, but fatigue had won out. When she woke briefly in the middle of the night, she saw Maria and Rashid sitting together in the dim light. Maria was holding a cup of tea, and Rashid was working on his laptop. They were talking quietly, careful not to wake her. Through the haze of half-sleep, Isabella heard Maria thank Rashid for the opportunity. She knew it was Isabella's idea, Maria said, but Rashid was the one who had made it all happen. Rashid's response made Isabella's chest tighten in a way she couldn't quite explain. He told Maria she reminded him of Isabella, back before the disappointment. The disappointment. That was how he had started referring to their infertility struggle. Not as a medical condition or a temporary setback, but as a disappointment, as if Isabella herself had somehow failed to meet expectations. In that moment on the couch, pretending to still be asleep, Isabella watched her husband and her sister sit together in comfortable silence. Their eyes met for just a second longer than necessary before Maria looked away. It was nothing, Isabella told herself. Nothing at all. The pattern started shortly after that. Rashid began traveling more frequently for work. Abu Dhabi, he would say. Site inspections for a major development project his company was overseeing. The trips had always been part of his job, but now they seemed constant. 3 times in 1 month, then 4. Each time he would kiss Isabella's forehead on his way out, promise to be back by Thursday, and tell her he would make it up to her. Isabella found herself asking if the trips were really necessary. It was the 3rd one that month, she pointed out one morning as he packed. Rashid explained patiently that the project was behind schedule, that his presence on site was critical, that this was temporary. His tone suggested the conversation was over. After he left, Maria emerged from her room, already dressed for her hotel shift. She commented on how hard Rashid worked, and Isabella agreed automatically, though something in her voice betrayed her frustration. "Too hard lately," she said. The apartment developed a new rhythm during Rashid's absences. Isabella would work late at the office, and Maria would already be home when she returned. They would watch television together, talk about their days, share the kind of easy companionship Isabella had missed since leaving the Philippines. Maria's presence made the loneliness bearable. But Rashid's trips kept extending. Text messages would arrive in the evening saying he was delayed another day. Problems with contractors, issues with permits, always something. Isabella would read these messages while sitting next to Maria, who would glance at the screen and offer sympathetic comments about the demands of his job. One night, after yet another delay notification, Isabella found herself scrolling through old photos on her phone. Pictures from their honeymoon in Santorini, from their first apartment together. From a time when Rashid's trips were occasional and his attention was undivided. Maria sat beside her on the couch, and Isabella felt grateful for her sister's company, even as she wondered when her marriage had started feeling so distant. She told Maria she was glad she was there, that the apartment felt less empty with her in it. Maria smiled and said she was glad too. The television played in the background, neither of them really watching it. just two sisters filling the space where a husband should have been. Outside, Dubai glittered in the darkness, thousands of lives intersecting in ways they would never fully understand. And in that apartment, in that moment, Isabella had no idea that everything she thought she knew about her family was already unraveling. The pieces were already in motion. The lies were already being told. And the sister sitting beside her, the one she had brought to Dubai out of love and loneliness, was about to become the center of a betrayal so profound it would destroy everything Isabella had built. But tonight, she knew none of that. Tonight, she just felt grateful not to be alone. Isabella stood in Rashid's home office, the passport still trembling in her hands. She checked the document again, hoping somehow she had misread the dates, but there they were, stamped in official UAE immigration ink. Entry after entry. Her sister had never left Dubai. The safe sat open before her, and Isabella reached deeper, pushing past the financial documents she had originally been searching for. Her fingers found a property deed, and when she unfolded it, her breath caught. A villa in the desert outskirts of Dubai, purchased 14 months ago. The same month Maria had moved out of their apartment into her own place. Rashid's name was listed as the sole owner, but Isabella had never heard him mention buying this property. Underneath were medical documents, hospital bills from Dubai Medical Center, appointment cards for obstetrics visits, all of them addressed to Maria Santos, with dates stretching back nearly a year. Isabella's hands shook as she pulled out her phone and began photographing everything. Each document was another piece of a puzzle she desperately didn't want to solve. The next morning, Isabella called in sick to work, for the first time in 3 years. She was already in her car before her supervisor had finished expressing concern, driving toward the hotel where Maria had worked. The building rose against the Dubai skyline, one of those 5-star properties catering to international business travelers. Isabella had visited before, proud to see her sister thriving in such a prestigious establishment. The Human Resources office was tucked behind a door marked Staff Only on the 3rd floor. Isabella knocked and entered before she could change her mind. The woman behind the desk looked up with a practiced professional smile. Isabella kept her voice steady as she introduced herself and asked about Maria Santos. The HR manager's expression shifted as she pulled up the records. Yes, Maria had worked there, but she had left approximately 9 months ago. Isabella's stomach dropped, but she kept her composure. Left as in transferred to Abu Dhabi for that management position, she clarified, already knowing what the answer would be. The manager shook her head slowly. There had been no transfer. Maria had resigned, citing personal reasons. The resignation had been sudden, but processed properly. She had given 2 weeks' notice, worked through it professionally, and left on good terms. The manager remembered Maria well, a dedicated employee. The hotel had actually been disappointed to lose her, especially since she had mentioned the Abu Dhabi opportunity seemed too good to pass up. Isabella felt the floor shift beneath her feet. Maria had told the hotel she was moving to Abu Dhabi. She had told Isabella the same thing. The lie had been consistent, carefully maintained. Isabella thanked the manager and left before the questions she could see forming could be asked. In her car, Isabella pulled out her phone and scrolled back through months of messages from Maria. They were all there. Regular communication that had continued right up until 3 weeks ago. Updates about the new job in Abu Dhabi. Comments about the hotel there being demanding but exciting. Questions about how Isabella was doing, whether the fertility treatments were helping, if she was taking care of herself. Just last month, Maria had sent a long voice message talking about her day, about missing Dubai sometimes, about hoping to visit soon once her schedule settled. Isabella played it now, listening to her sister's voice with new ears. Maria sounded normal, happy even. There was no hint of deception, no crack in the facade. How had she maintained this lie so effortlessly while living just miles away? Isabella remembered when Maria had first announced she was moving out of their apartment. She was excited about independence. Maria had found a small studio apartment closer to the hotel, she had said. It made the commute easier, and she felt ready to live on her own. Isabella remembered feeling proud of her, even a little sad to see her go. Rashid had helped with the security deposit, had made sure Maria found something safe and affordable. 3 months after that move, Maria's messages had shifted slightly. She had mentioned feeling tired, working long hours, dealing with what she thought might be a stomach bug that wouldn't go away. Then came the announcement about the Abu Dhabi transfer, a management training program at the sister hotel. Better pay, incredible opportunity. She would be leaving in 2 weeks. Could Isabella believe how fast things were moving? Isabella remembered the evening Maria came to say goodbye. It was a Tuesday after work, and Maria had shown up at their apartment with takeout from their favorite Filipino restaurant. She had wanted one last dinner together before the move, she had said. They sat on the balcony, the same spot where Isabella had first suggested Maria come to Dubai, and talked about how much had changed in just over a year. Maria had worn a loose traditional Filipino dress that night, the kind with flowing fabric that hung comfortably in hand. Dubai's heat. Isabella remembered complimenting it, remembered Maria laughing and saying she had been eating too much lately and needed clothes that didn't feel restrictive. At the time, it had seemed like a casual comment. Now, Isabella realized Maria had been 3 months pregnant, carefully dressed to hide what was already beginning to show. They had talked for hours that evening. Maria asked about the fertility treatments, whether Isabella was still going to appointments, whether there was any new hope. Isabella had confided that she and Rashid had decided to take a break from trying, that the constant disappointment was putting too much strain on their marriage. Maria had reached across the table and squeezed her hand, her eyes full of what Isabella had interpreted as sympathy. Had it been guilt instead? Knowing she was carrying Rashid's children while listening to Isabella grieve the family she couldn't have? When Rashid came home that night, he had joined them for coffee. He and Maria had talked about the Abu Dhabi opportunity, and Rashid had offered advice about negotiating her contract, about what to expect from hotel management culture in the UAE. He had seemed genuinely supportive, had even made a joke about Maria stealing all the best career opportunities while Isabella was stuck in financial consulting. They had all laughed. The 3 of them sitting together like a normal family, while 2 of them hid a secret that would destroy everything. Maria had hugged Isabella tightly before leaving that night. She had held on a little longer than usual, and Isabella remembered feeling emotional about her sister leaving Dubai. She hadn't realized then that Maria was holding on because she knew this goodbye was built on lies, that she wasn't actually going anywhere except into deeper hiding. The messages after the supposed move to Abu Dhabi had been frequent at first. Photos of the new hotel, though Isabella realized now she had never actually seen Maria in any of them. Just architectural shots, lobby views, things easily found online. But they had talked on the phone. Isabella pulled up the call history. Regular conversations, sometimes twice a week. She remembered those calls, Maria asking about Isabella's life, about Rashid's business trips, about whether Isabella was feeling better about the infertility news. Maria had been an attentive sister, always checking in, always caring. How had she done it? How had Maria carried on entire conversations while hiding a pregnancy, while living in a villa owned by Isabella's husband, while constructing an elaborate alternate reality? Isabella drove to the address on the property deed. The GPS led her far outside the city center, into areas where luxury developments gave way to desert landscapes. This was where people built when they wanted privacy, when they needed to hide something. The kind of isolation money could buy. The villa appeared after a series of increasingly empty roads, modern architecture designed for the desert climate, surrounded by a low wall that provided security without blocking the view. One car sat in the driveway. Through gaps in the curtains, Isabella could see movement. She parked down the road and sat for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. According to the property deed, Rashid had purchased this villa 14 months ago, right when Maria had supposedly moved into her own apartment for the first time. Had there ever been a studio apartment, or had that been another lie? Or perhaps Maria had lived there briefly, before everything changed. Isabella thought back to Maria's moving day. Rashid had helped, had taken a day off work to drive Maria and her belongings across the city. He had been gone for hours. Isabella had stayed behind, needing to work, trusting her husband to help her sister settle in. Had he brought Maria here that day? Or had the villa come later, after the pregnancy, after the affair had progressed to a point where more privacy was needed? The hospital bills in Rashid's safe told part of the story. Prenatal care starting 8 months ago. Regular appointments at Dubai Medical Center. Someone had been taking Maria to these appointments, sitting with her, making sure she received proper care. That someone had been Rashid. During all those business trips to Abu Dhabi that had never actually happened. Isabella forced herself out of the car and walked toward the villa. The afternoon sun beat down, making the pavement shimmer with heat. A child's toy sat near the entrance. Laundry hung on a back balcony, tiny clothes swaying in the breeze, evidence of life, of babies, of everything Maria had been hiding. She knocked on the door, and the sound seemed to echo across the empty desert around them. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then footsteps. A baby crying. The door opened. Maria stood there, and time stopped. She was holding an infant, and the shock on her face was absolute. Behind her, another baby wailed from somewhere deeper in the house. Maria looked older, exhausted in a way that went beyond simple tiredness. Her eyes filled with tears the moment she saw Isabella. Isabella could barely speak. She managed to say her sister's name, and it came out broken. Maria glanced back nervously, as if expecting someone else to appear. Then she said the words that confirmed everything. "You shouldn't be here." Isabella's questions came flooding out. What was this? Where had Maria really been? Why had she lied? The babies she could hear crying, were they hers? But Maria was already shaking her head, panic rising in her expression. "Not here," Maria whispered urgently. "They couldn't talk here. Tomorrow." The cafe near Isabella's apartment, the one they used to go to together. Noon. She would explain everything then. Isabella had to understand. She couldn't talk now. Isabella tried to ask about the babies, but Maria cut her off with genuine fear in her voice. "Tomorrow," she repeated. "Please, just go, please." The door closed, and Isabella stood frozen on the doorstep. Behind it, she could hear Maria's composure finally breaking. The kind of sobbing that comes from months of holding everything inside. Of maintaining lies that had grown too heavy to carry alone. Isabella walked back to her car in a daze. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maria. Just 3 words. "I'm so sorry." Isabella sat in her car outside that isolated villa, reading those words over and over. 9 months of messages scrolled above them. Cheerful updates about Abu Dhabi. Questions about Isabella's day. Voice memos full of sisterly affection. all of it real in its emotion perhaps, but built on a foundation of devastating lies. Her sister had been here the entire time, living in a villa Rashid owned, giving birth to twin boys, maintaining an elaborate fiction about a life in another city while actually living just 30 miles away. And somehow, impossibly, Maria had kept up the pretense in dozens of phone calls, hundreds of text messages, months of communication that never once cracked to reveal the truth. Tomorrow, at a cafe where they used to laugh over coffee and talk about their new lives in Dubai, Maria would tell her everything. But Isabella already knew enough to understand that the explanation, whatever it was, would destroy everything she thought she knew about her family. She drove back toward the city as the sun began to set, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple. Her phone sat in the cup holder, Maria's apology still glowing on the screen. Behind her, in that villa hidden in the emptiness, her sister was alone with 2 babies and secrets that had finally been uncovered. The investigation had led her here. Tomorrow would bring the truth, but tonight, Isabella had to sit with the knowledge that for 9 months, every conversation with Maria had been a performance. Every "I miss you" had been said from a villa owned by Isabella's husband. Every question about Isabella's marriage had come from the woman who was destroying it. Nothing would ever be the same again. The cafe Isabella chose was deliberate. It was the same place where she and Maria had shared countless conversations during those first months in Dubai. Back when everything had seemed possible and the future stretched ahead with promise. Isabella arrived early, taking a table near the window where she could see Maria approaching. Her hands shook as she ordered coffee she knew she wouldn't drink. The weight of what she had discovered sat heavy in her chest, making it difficult to breathe normally. Maria appeared exactly at noon, and Isabella barely recognized her. The bright-eyed sister who had arrived at Dubai International Airport just over a year ago was gone. In her place stood a woman who looked a decade older, with dark circles carved deep beneath her eyes and a weariness that went beyond simple exhaustion. She moved slowly, as if every step required conscious effort, and when she sat down across from Isabella, the silence between them stretched until it became almost unbearable. Isabella broke first. She kept her voice low and steady, just 2 words that carried the weight of everything that had shattered between them. "Tell me." Maria's composure crumbled immediately. Her hands trembled as she reached for the water glass, and when she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. She said she hadn't meant for any of it to happen, but Isabella cut through that deflection immediately. "For what to happen?" she demanded. What exactly had Maria not meant to do? The story that came out next made Isabella's blood run cold. Maria claimed that Rashid had forced himself on her, that it started when Isabella was working late, when Rashid would come to Maria's room under the pretense of checking if she needed anything. The visits became more frequent, more intimate, until one night everything changed. Maria described being terrified, feeling trapped in a country where she had no real rights, where her visa was sponsored by the same man who was assaulting her. She said Rashid had threatened her with deportation, had told her that no one would believe a young Filipino worker over an established Emirati businessman, that Isabella herself would blame Maria for destroying their marriage. The babies, Maria continued through her tears, were the result of these assaults. She hadn't known she was pregnant until it was too late to do anything about it. Rashid had moved her to the villa, she claimed, supposedly to protect her, but really to keep her isolated and under his control. He had taken her passport, the one document that could give her any freedom, and locked it away where she couldn't reach it. Isabella felt the world tilting. She reached across the table and took Maria's hands, her own tears starting to fall. The guilt crashed over her in waves. She had brought Maria to Dubai. She had put her sister in the same house as a predator, Every moment of the past year replayed in her mind with this new, horrifying context. The late-night conversations she had witnessed between Rashid and Maria. The business trips that had never actually happened. The way Maria had seemed to withdraw into herself before announcing the Abu Dhabi transfer that was just another lie. Isabella's voice turned to steel through her tears. They were getting Maria out, she promised. All three of them, Maria and both babies. And Rashid was going to pay for what he had done. Maria nodded, still crying, and for a moment it seemed like the worst was over. Like the truth was finally out and they could begin to heal together. But that moment lasted less than 24 hours. Isabella spent that evening planning. She researched lawyers who specialized in assault cases. She looked into women's shelters and support organizations in Dubai. She documented everything she had found in Rashid's safe, backing up the photographs multiple times. When Rashid came home that night, she was waiting for him with a fury she had never felt before. She didn't ease into it. The moment he walked through the door, she told him to sit down. Her voice carried an authority that made him stop in his tracks. When he asked what was wrong, Isabella unleashed the accusation with all the rage of the past day building behind it. She knew what he had done to Maria. Every detail, every lie, every moment of the abuse he had inflicted on her sister. Rashid's face went through a series of expressions, confusion first, then realization, and then something that made Isabella's stomach turn. He became calm, too calm. The kind of composure that comes from being prepared for exactly this conversation. He asked quietly what Maria had told her. And when Isabella repeated the accusations, her voice shaking with fury as she described the rape and the imprisonment and the children born from violence, Rashid simply sighed. "Is that what she said?" he asked. And then he pulled out his phone. What he showed Isabella next destroyed everything she thought she understood about the situation. The phone contained months of text messages between Rashid and Maria, and they painted a completely different picture. Messages from Maria saying she couldn't stop thinking about the previous night. Messages arranging secret meetings when Isabella would be at work. Messages where Maria told Rashid that Isabella didn't need to know, that what they had was special, that eventually he would have to choose. Isabella scrolled with shaking hands, each message cutting deeper than the last. There were videos. Maria kissing Rashid with obvious desire. Maria saying she loved him, her voice thick with emotion and longing. Voice messages where Maria talked about their future together, about how she and the boys could be a real family with Rashid if he would just leave Isabella. The timestamps were damning. Messages throughout the pregnancy, casual and affectionate. Messages after the births, Maria sending photos of the twins and talking about how much they looked like their father. Messages from just weeks ago. Maria asking when Rashid would finally acknowledge them publicly, when he would stop pretending their relationship didn't exist. But it was the other messages that truly broke Isabella's heart. Rashid's responses, telling Maria that their affair had been a mistake, that it couldn't continue, that he loved his wife. And Maria's responses, insisting that he didn't mean it, that he had felt something real, that their sons deserved their father in their lives fully. Isabella felt herself sinking to the floor as the reality crashed over her. Rashid explained carefully that Maria had been trying to break up their marriage since she got pregnant, that she had believed if she gave him children, he would leave his infertile wife and build a new family with her instead. Every message, every video, every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. This had been a consensual affair, and Maria had lied about everything. The next morning, Isabella drove back to the villa with a rage that had transformed overnight from protective fury to utter betrayal. She didn't knock this time. She walked straight through the door, finding Maria in the living room feeding one of the twins while the other slept nearby in a bassinet. Maria looked up, her face going pale when she saw Isabella's expression. "You lied to me," Isabella said, her voice flat and cold. Maria tried to deny it, tried to claim that Rashid was manipulating the situation. But Isabella cut her off by reciting Maria's own words, the text messages, the declarations of love, the demands that Rashid choose her. All of it in Maria's own voice, time-stamped and undeniable. Maria's defenses crumbled quickly. She tried to claim it wasn't like that the context was missing. But Isabella had seen too much. The video of Maria kissing Rashid wasn't coerced. The voice messages begging him to leave his wife weren't sent under duress. And the final devastating question hung in the air between them until Isabella finally screamed it. "You told me he raped you." Maria broke completely then. She admitted through her tears that she had lied because she knew Isabella would never forgive her if she told the truth. The confession came tumbling out between sobs. She hadn't planned it, Maria insisted. The affair had just happened. And when she got pregnant, she had convinced herself that it meant something, that Rashid would realize they were meant to be together, that Isabella would eventually understand and move on. The cruelty of that assumption made Isabella's voice turn to ice. "He's my husband," she said simply. And Maria's response revealed the depth of her delusion. She claimed that Rashid hadn't been happy with Isabella, that he had confided in Maria about how the infertility struggle was destroying their marriage. So Maria had decided to give him what Isabella couldn't. Sons. 2 perfect boys. Surely that had to mean something. Isabella understood then with terrible clarity. Her sister had seen her suffering through infertility and had decided it was an opportunity, a weakness to exploit. Maria had given Rashid the family Isabella's body couldn't provide, fully believing it would make him choose differently. The betrayal cut deeper than anything Isabella had imagined possible. Maria tried to invoke their bond as sisters, but Isabella corrected her coldly. "You were my sister," she said. Past tense, final. When Maria begged, explaining that she had nothing now, that Rashid wouldn't marry her or even publicly acknowledge the children, that she was trapped in the villa with 2 babies and no future, Isabella felt something inside her simply shut down. "You made your choice," Isabella said without turning around. "Now live with it." She walked out, leaving Maria crying behind her, and didn't look back. The lawyer's office was in one of Dubai's gleaming business towers, all glass and steel and expensive furniture. The attorney listened carefully as Isabella laid out the situation, and her assessment was both practical and cold. The affair itself was consensual between adults, she explained. That complicated everything. But there were other legal angles they could pursue. Rashid had withheld Maria's passport without legal justification, which was a violation of UAE law. He had paternity responsibilities he was actively avoiding, which created both legal and financial exposure. And if he had used marital assets to support Maria and the children without Isabella's knowledge or consent, that constituted financial fraud in the context of their marriage. The lawyer made it clear that criminal charges were unlikely, but civil consequences were almost guaranteed. Isabella would get a favorable divorce settlement. Rashid would face potential issues with immigration authorities over the passport situation. And then the lawyer smiled slightly and added one more thing. His reputation, she said, Isabella could destroy herself if she was willing. Isabella was willing. The exposure happened methodically over the following weeks. Isabella filed for divorce first, making sure the paperwork detailed every relevant fact about Rashid's affair and secret children. She provided carefully selected evidence to his business partners, documenting how he had used company time and resources to maintain his double life. Maria, facing her own financial desperation and encouraged by her own lawyer, filed a paternity suit that made everything public record. In Dubai's tight-knit expat community, news like this spread like wildfire. The carefully built reputation Rashid had cultivated for years crumbled almost overnight. His business partners removed him from a major development project, explaining that his judgment and character reflected on all of them. In the courthouse, DNA tests confirmed what everyone already knew, and a judge ordered child support along, with public acknowledgement of paternity. The court also ordered Rashid to maintain Maria's visa sponsorship as part of his obligations to support the children, ensuring she could remain in the country legally to care for the twins. Her passport was returned to her immediately, no longer a tool of control, but her own document once again. Rashid signed the papers with his jaw clenched, watching everything he had built fall apart around him. Maria received her legal documents and passport at the villa, no longer trapped by immigration status, but still utterly alone. She looked at the twins sleeping in their cribs, touched their faces gently, and whispered an apology to no one in particular. The truth had come out, but the price of that truth had destroyed 3 lives completely and damaged countless others around them. In a city built on image and reputation, Rashid's carefully constructed persona was in ruins. Maria had her freedom, but had lost her sister forever. And Isabella had learned that the people closest to her were capable of betrayals she had never imagined possible. There would be no winners in this story, only survivors trying to pick up the pieces of what remained. 6 months passed like a slow exhale after holding your breath for too long. Isabella had moved out of the apartment she had shared with Rashid, finding a smaller place on the outskirts of Dubai, where the rent was manageable on a single income. The new apartment was nothing like the spacious flat overlooking the glittering skyline. This one had 2 rooms, basic furniture, and walls she had covered with photographs from Manila. Pictures of her parents, her childhood home, the beach where she and Maria used to play as children, before betrayal had become a word that defined their relationship. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks ago. Isabella received a settlement that would allow her to start over. But money felt meaningless when weighed against everything she had lost. She had handed in her resignation at the financial consulting firm, politely declining the managing partner's attempts to convince her to stay. Dubai held nothing for her anymore, except memories that cut like broken glass every time she revisited them. On a Thursday afternoon, with her flight to Manila scheduled for the following morning, Isabella was packing the last of her belongings when her phone rang. The screen showed an unknown number. She stared at it for a long moment before letting it go to voicemail. When the notification appeared, she almost deleted it without listening. But something made her press play. Maria's voice filled the quiet apartment. She sounded tired, hesitant, like someone who knew they were crossing a boundary but couldn't stop themselves. The message was brief but devastating. Maria said she knew Isabella didn't want to hear from her, that she probably had no right to make this call. But the boys were 9 months old now, and they looked like Isabella. They had her eyes, Maria said, the same dark brown eyes that ran in their family. Every time Maria looked at her sons, she saw her sister's face, and the weight of what she had destroyed became unbearable all over again. She wasn't asking for forgiveness, Maria insisted. She just needed Isabella to know that not a single day passed without regret, without wishing she could undo every choice that had led them here. Isabella listened to the entire message without moving. When it ended, she deleted it with a single tap and went back to packing. But Maria's words stayed with her, echoing in the empty spaces between folding clothes and sealing boxes. The next morning, Isabella made one final trip to Dubai Mall for last-minute souvenirs. Small gifts for her parents, trinkets that would sit on shelves back home as reminders of the years she had spent building a life in this city. She was walking past a children's clothing store, a shopping bag in one hand, and her mind already halfway to the airport, when she turned a corner and time stopped. 20 feet away stood Maria, pushing a double stroller. The twin boys sat inside, awake and looking around, with that wide-eyed curiosity that babies have, when the world is still new and full of wonder. Maria saw Isabella at the exact same moment, and both women froze. The crowded mall continued moving around them, hundreds of shoppers passing by without noticing the silent devastation happening between two sisters who had once been inseparable. Maria's face showed everything at once. Hope that maybe somehow this chance encounter could begin to mend what was broken. Fear that Isabella would turn away in anger. Regret so profound it seemed to weigh down her entire body. Isabella felt her own emotions crashing over her like waves. The pain of betrayal. The anger that still burned hot despite 6 months of distance. The grief for the family they would never be again. The twins babbled happily, unaware of the tension. One of them reached out toward Isabella, tiny fingers grasping at the air between them. Maria's eyes filled with tears, and Isabella could see her sister's lips forming the words, even though no sound came out. "I'm sorry." Isabella looked at the boys. Maria had been right. They did look like her. The same eyes, the same shape to their faces that marked them as family. These children were her nephews, her blood, the family she would never have herself. For just a moment, she imagined a different world where forgiveness was possible, where she could be Aunt Isabella and watch these boys grow up. But that world didn't exist. Some betrayals cut too deep. Some trust, once shattered, could never be pieced back together. Isabella turned and walked away without a word. Behind her, Maria remained frozen in place, one hand gripping the stroller handle, tears streaming down her face as she stood alone in a mall filled with strangers. At Dubai International Airport, Isabella approached the check-in counter with a single suitcase containing everything that mattered from her life here. The agent asked if she was heading to Manila, and Isabella gave a simple answer that felt like the truest thing she had said in months. Home. She walked through security without looking back. The city she was leaving had given her so much and taken even more. The marriage she had believed in, the career she had built, the sister she had loved, all of it gone now, reduced to memories and legal documents and a settlement check that would help her start over somewhere far away from here. On the plane, as Dubai's skyline shrank below her window, Isabella's phone vibrated one final time. A text from Maria, short and achingly honest. She understood if Isabella never forgave her, but she needed her sister to know that she loved her and was sorry she hadn't been the sister Isabella deserved. Isabella read the message twice. Her finger hovered over the reply button, and for a fraction of a second, she considered responding. Considered acknowledging that somewhere beneath all the anger and pain, there might still be love, buried so deep it would never see light again. Instead, she closed the message without deleting it and switched her phone to airplane mode. She closed her eyes as a single tear traced down her cheek. And when the flight attendant asked if she needed anything, Isabella shook her head and turned toward the window. Some betrayals could never be undone. Some families could never be repaired. Some doors, once closed, stayed closed forever. If this story resonated with you, or if you know someone who needs to hear it, please share this video. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another. Because behind every gleaming skyline, there are stories like Isabella's waiting to be told. Thank you for watching.